So once again, welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's webinar, PPSR and Insolvency Legislation, Reviewing Your Registrations. Today's webinar is presented by myself, Paul Mead, and a relatively new addition to the team here at CreditorWatch, Lucinda Judd.
Hi everyone.
As with all of the webinars that we run here at CreditorWatch, we have a fair amount of information to get through, material for you today, which I hope you'll find not only insightful, but more importantly useful over the coming months of uncertainty with the COVID-19 pandemic and of course the economic fluctuations that are going to occur as a result of it. Today's webinar, we'll do a quick recap of last week's fantastic webinar that was run by our CEO, Patrick Coughlin, and insolvency expert, Jeanette Mueller, in case any of you missed that webinar. If you did, don't worry too much. You can always jump on our webinars page on the CreditorWatch landing page itself and watch it in its entirety. We'll then look at the impacts of the reforms and the new legislation on current registrations that businesses undertake, as well as looking at the implications and benefits to commence registering now on your new clients. Or if you haven't registered on the PPSR before, some of the benefits that you can do by jumping on and doing that. We'll look at some of the things you can do as credit managers or business owners during this COVID-19 downturn to assist you in making sure your PPSR registrations are in order. For those of you that are new to PPSR, or if you're looking to update your registrations, we'll dive into CreditorWatch's bulk upload and review features. These tools are a great way to ensure you have comprehensive coverage of your customer ledger. Then finally, time permitting, we'll run through a short demonstration of our PPSR platform, PPSR Logic, and then finally we'll answer any questions you may have that come out of the material today.
Before we get started, a few points to cover off. Firstly, why are we here? The answer is we're here to give you some perspective on the recent insolvency changes, how they affect your security interests, and how you can go about protecting yourself moving forward. Where can I ask questions? At the bottom of the page, there should be a Q&A pop-up for you to answer your questions as we go. If we don't get to answering all of your questions today during the webinar, we'll get back to you as soon as possible after this session today. Will I get today's recording and presentation? Of course you will. The webinar will be available to everyone on our webinars page not too long after today's session. The link also has all of our previously recorded presentations, including additional PPSR webinars, which cover off a bit of the more introductory points on the PPS regime. So more background really on CreditorWatch as a whole. We're Australia's leading commercial credit reporting bureau. We currently have over 50,000 customers. Our main products include the following 7 points. We've got CreditorWatch, which is our core product. This provides credit reporting, proactive monitoring and alerts, and also some debt collection tools. We also have Debtor Logic, which helps you to prioritize the way that you collect your debt and helps you to better understand your accounts receivable ledger. We have Director Due Diligence, which allows you to assess the individuals behind a company and also receive adverse cross-directorship alerts. Apply Easy is our onboarding platform and allows you to perform online credit application and automated decisioning solutions. PPSR Logic is what we're focusing on today, obviously, and this is a way to simplify the way you create, manage, and renew registrations. We have financial risk assessments. This allows you to assess the financial viability of an important trading partner. And then finally, we have the portfolio health checks, which provides a comprehensive review of your database. If you're new to PPSR, I'd like to include some statistics on just how big the register itself is to give you a better understanding of why it is important to register your security interests. Currently, there are over 10 million security interests registered on the PPSR, with almost 3 million of those interests being over the other goods. When we're talking about other goods, we're talking about perishable and non-perishable items, stock in retail stores, any other tangible property that is not a motor vehicle, watercraft, aircraft, helicopter, or agricultural goods. If you are not registering and you supply your goods to a business that has registrations against them, you face the very real prospect of not only losing your stock, but also missing out on any potential monetary compensation from an administrator.
If you tuned into last week's webinar, Jeanette quite thoroughly, and Patrick quite thoroughly, dissected the COVID-19 reforms and temporary amendments to Australia's insolvency laws. For me, one of the big things that came out of it, it's really important to highlight the temporary part of these measures. In essence, from March 25, the minimum dollar value for a business to issue a statutory demand must be at least $20,000, which is up from the standard $2,000. Business also that has been issued the statutory demand now has 6 months to respond, compared to the 21 days previously. What this does mean is that statutory demands can still be issued. It hasn't stopped that process occurring at all. It just means obviously a lengthening of the time in which a business can respond to those. The other part of these temporary measures is that directors have protection and relief from any personal liability for insolvent trading in the 6-month period up to September 24, 2020. There is quite a bit in there for both suppliers and customers, which will strongly impact their dealings in the coming 6 months, and more importantly, beyond this 6-month period. As I said, if you did miss last week's webinar, there is a lot of really useful information in there, and Jeanette really has dissected that Reform Act quite well as Patrick. So I definitely suggest jumping onto the webinars page and having a listen to that. So look, what do these changes really mean for businesses, and how do they affect you as a supplier or customer? These laws do give a lot more protection in their dealings with suppliers, and hopefully that means a lot of businesses that would otherwise shut down can continue to trade in some shape or form and come out of this, or come out of the other side of this. As Jeanette mentioned last week, this is by no means a free pass for businesses. If they're already in a negative financial position coming into this period, unfortunately, these protections will not be enough to ensure that they will be able to trade out of this pandemic. Businesses still have to ensure they are doing all the right things to rectify their poor financial position. They have to have a turnaround plan if they want to receive the benefit of these protections in the coming 6 months. One of the other key takeaways from these changes is that directors, as I said, must have a clear strategy or plan in place to ensure that they can return to solvent trading as of September 24. As we've heard in numerous press releases over the past month, and what we will definitely hear more of in the future, is that the economic effects of COVID-19 and the shutdowns that have occurred are going to last a lot longer than this 6-month period for which businesses will receive this temporary relief. Interestingly, what we've seen already in the past fortnight is personal insolvencies jump by almost 20%. So that's the last fortnight into April, compared to the previous fortnight, which had 887. So there was 1,019 in the most recent fortnight, compared to 887 the previous fortnight. So look, obviously this shows that businesses are definitely seeing the impact of COVID-19 already. And of course, you can see it as you walk down the street with all the retailers that are shut down, either temporarily, but there are some as well that are permanently closed. Businesses will still go into involuntary administration during this period, but also at the conclusion of this 6-month period. Excuse me. Look, even if the government extends the end date for these measures, it only prolongs the inevitable for a number of businesses. So what impact does COVID-19 have on existing or current registrations? Look, thankfully, if you have already registered and your registrations are up to date and current, there isn't a significant impact on those registrations on the PPSR. What this period really does provide to you or present to you is a small window to review your existing registrations to ensure that they're in order and you are covered with that perfected security interest. From my personal point of view, some of the key points that can be checked during this period to really make sure you've got a perfected security interest. Obviously the basics, checking you've got the correct identifier for your customers. So you've got that correct ABN, ACN. Also importantly, if you are supplying a tangible good or inventory, you want to ensure that you've indicated your retention of title on your registrations. I've seen a lot of customers that have taken up PPSR logic, and we've seen their registrations that have previously been done, and that basic retention of title piece hasn't been included on the registration. So it really is now a good time to jump in and make sure that's all in order. Now, this is this third, but it probably should be at the top of the list, and that is ensuring your security agreements are in order with your customers, ensuring they're signed, and most importantly, you can actually find them, you know where they are. If you're not sure what a security agreement is, or whether it is up to date, feel free to get in contact with us following the webinar, and we can provide you some guidance on this. Why is a security agreement so important? Well, if and when your customer goes into administration, you're going to have to provide a couple of things to the administrator. Firstly, a copy of your security agreement, the verification statement that you get when you create a registration, so essentially your certificate of registration, and of course any additional documentation to validate your claim over your stock or money that you're seeking. Finally, what you can do during this period is a portfolio health check with CreditorWatch on your ledger to ensure that you have in fact registered your entire ledger and that you aren't missing any new or of course older customers that should be registered. So now looking at new registrations, we've highlighted earlier in this webinar of the potential fallout that could occur once the risk of COVID-19 reduces and these measures are wound back. The impact of registering on the PPSR now as a secured party is that it will protect your stock and business and ensure you're a secured creditor if and when your customers enter into administration and liquidation. Look, the COVID Act, it also presents businesses with a unique opportunity to start the process of registering without suffering the potential impacts of timing issues. Now, if you're registering that retention of title and inventory, there are quite specific timeframes that you need to do it. This allows you to jump in, register on your customers and not suffer too much of an impact around those timing issues. And I'm happy to go into those in detail should you have any questions around that. As I mentioned in the slides, and the first step to registering is to have your security agreements in place with your customers. So it really is now is the perfect time to ensure that you have these security agreements correctly worded and properly executed by your clients. It really is such a vital component to registering and the fundamental part of registering against your customers. I guess also from a risk management point of view, this is also the perfect time to utilise the CreditorWatch suite of products to identify those debtors on your ledger that potentially are at risk of entering into administration, either voluntary or involuntary, and making sure you've got a PPS registration against them.
Why register on PPSR now? I've touched on this a couple of times, but the new laws are a double-edged sword for businesses out there. Businesses can continue to trade, but must still do so responsibly. And if you are a creditor to these businesses, you really do want to ensure you're adequately covered should they go into administration. Across the board, we have seen a number of trade insurers reduce limits on policies to zero. If you're a credit manager, this can be a pretty unsettling impact to your business. And whilst PPSR is not an insurance policy, if you register correctly and register early, you can really limit the losses you as a business will suffer should a client go under. I've included some stats on insolvencies which Jeanette raised last week. 91% of directors of insolvent companies had misconduct reported. And in addition to that, 50% of companies that enter administration are found to be trading insolvently. Why are these stats important? This is really because the potential impact of an administrator attempting to recover monies on the grounds of it being an unfair preference payment. It's bad enough having a customer go into liquidation, and this can be a course of being made worse by then having an administrator chase you for payments you've received from them in the 6-month period leading up to them entering administration. Registering your security interest on PPSR is one step to prevent the loss of monies to these preference claims. PPSR Logic is CreditorWatch's PPSR platform. The platform itself is relatively new to the market, having been launched 2 years ago. The great thing about having such a new platform is that we've been able to build a number of features into the system which aren't available on the government site or maybe even through alternate providers. We've made it easier for you to navigate around, not only creating new registrations, but also finding your existing registrations and undertaking the required management of them. One of the great functions of PPSR Logic, and also of having myself and Paul dedicated to the platform, is that we can undertake and review your existing registrations when you sign up and pinpoint any potential errors that may prevent you from having a registration or a valid registration in place rather. We also take on the bulk upload process for you to ensure you are using the correct identifier for your customers and also ensure you're only registering against customers that are currently active. The system integrates with CreditorWatch, which means you can create a registration directly from a credit report, as well as from our onboarding application, Apply Easy. So this means you can simply register as and when you are approving them for a credit account. So part of your onboarding process. Another one of the great features of PPSR Logic is that all of our registrations are visible in the system. So you can manage them without needing to enter any tokens. So really easy to manage there. We also provide you with free alerts on your expiring registrations and provide you with multiple email notifications in the month leading up to the expiry date. So this can be really, a great benefit to your accounts receivable and credit teams who no longer need to worry about constantly checking up on an Excel spreadsheet to see who is coming up for expiry.
Thanks, Lucy. Now, I might just jump in quickly and show you a quick demonstration of the PPSR platform. Now, I'm sure a lot of you will have seen it in the past, but if you are new to the platform itself, really just want to highlight some of the key points of the system itself that will make it easier for you to create your registrations and manage them as well. So the system itself, we try and put everything on the one page, so it's simple to follow. You're not jumping between screens to try and get to the information you're after. And look, there's a lot of smart search functionality in there as well to make it easier for you to actually find the registrations you're after. So the first thing we do, if you're an existing PPSR user, we will jump in and load your SPG into the system. And by doing so, we actually load up all of your existing registrations. So you can see here when we talked about those email alerts on expiring registrations, the way in which we detail your registrations is and list them is which registrations are due to expire first. So you're never going to miss out on an expiring registration because in addition to the email alerts that you get, you'll be able to see them on the system here. The management functions of the registrations are all here. So there's the ability to discharge registrations, extend a registration end time if needed, and amend a registration with the details that are required. As Lucy touched on, the PPSR system and CreditorWatch do speak to one another. So if you're looking at a potential customer, we've got an ACN here and you're not quite sure who that customer is, you can click through View Credit Report and it will take you to CreditorWatch to view the credit report itself. The search functionality is also great. So if you do want to manually come in and find out if you've got a registration against your customer, you can search their ACN or ABN. But of course, we can do a portfolio check for you to match your registrations that you've got against those customers in your ledger as well. There's a couple of smart search functions in here which aren't necessarily available on the government website, and one of the big ones is being able to search on ACN or ABN. It gives you that extra flexibility to not have to worry about entering in, giving notice identifiers, or if you've lost a registration number, you don't necessarily need it. You can just search on their particular ACN or ABN. One of the other great functions is the templating function, and this, if you've seen the system before, you'll know that this is how we actually interact with the CreditorWatch platform itself. So we have standard templates, and we obviously work directly with you to set those up correctly and get the details specific to your registrations in the system as well. Jumping across to CreditorWatch, you'll see here, if you're a user of CreditorWatch, this is your credit file that you're looking at. You have all the details on here. All you have to do is, if you're happy with the information in there, click Create PPSR Registration. All of the templates will be loaded for you to select the most relevant one. All you have to do is jump down to the bottom of the system. You can choose to add organisation grantor depending on the details that you have. As this entity has an ACN, we'll select ACN. And you can see here one of the other great functions of the CreditorWatch and PPSR platform is we have a duplicate warning for you. So you're not unnecessarily creating registrations than you otherwise would. And you can click on the link to view what that registration is as well. As I mentioned before, the system does integrate with Apply Easy. I'm happy to jump in and show you that at another time should you wish to have a specific demonstration on that. I'm obviously conscious of time, so we won't go into that too much at this stage. So I have a quick poll question rather for you out there. It's really around whether you want to be contacted in relation to not only PPSR logic, but also PPSR directly. If you're new to PPSR and you're not sure about your security agreements, or if you're just not sure about how to register, I will set that up now. We can get you answering that. I'll give you a couple of moments just to answer that. Okay, fantastic. It looks like we've had quite a positive response in relation to that. If you have selected yes, that you want to be contacted in relation to PPSR logic, we'll ensure that you're contacted shortly after the webinar is concluded. I guess some just additional resources for you all to touch on. Should you like to after the webinar is finished, or if you just have questions around PPSR and not quite sure where to turn to, we have created a PPSR ebook, which you can download. The link is available on our PPSR Logic landing page as well, and we'll make sure that link is up on the CreditorWatch landing page for you too. Some additional resources that are available to everyone, regardless of whether you're a CreditorWatch customer or not. We have, as I mentioned before, made a number of PPSR webinars that you can jump into, but some of the basics that we did some time back was a 3-part series with guest contributor Terry Ledland around making PPSR easy, obviously getting your registrations right, and creating, managing and renewing registrations. And we of course provide case studies on some of our bigger customers and users of the PPSR Logic platform, and of course you can access those at any time as well. If you are a user of PPSR Logic and you haven't yet downloaded our how-to guide, it's available on the PPSR Logic website, and of course if you are new to PPSR as well, you can jump on, get a PPSR Logic login, begin registering and use that how-to guide as well. Of course, not only CreditorWatch and PPSR, we constantly releasing blog articles on the current market, on I guess CreditorWatch products itself, and some of the key things that are occurring in the economy. I'd certainly recommend that you keep an eye out for those and subscribe to our blogs, and of course follow us on LinkedIn. Lastly, before I jump into some of the questions, we do have another poll question for you to answer. and that's did you find today's webinar insightful? I'll launch that poll now for you and give you a couple of moments to answer that. Well, thankfully, we had a really overwhelmingly positive response to that. There was over 96% of you that found that insightful. As I said, there's only so much material you can cover off in half an hour. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions that have come out of today's session. Obviously, there's a lot more detail that we can always answer or go into, so I'm happy to as well. What I might do now, we do have a couple of minutes spare. I'll jump in and answer some of the questions that can be that you've asked. So one of the questions that comes through is PPSR always seems to refer to title of goods. How can a service provider register a PPSR? Really great question, and this I guess comes back to what is the use of PPSR. Really, if you're a credit provider and providing a good or service on credit terms, you should be registering that interest on the PPSR. There is specific registration types which are around intangible property, so the actual monetary component of a good or service you provide to your customers, which you can register. So there is definitely an application for that on the PPSR. It's not just specific to tangible goods. Another question we've had is, should we only register key debtors or all of our debtors list? Again, another really great question, and I guess it comes down to really your risk appetite and what you see as an affordable expense around PPSR. The cost of registering a PPSR is quite low, and the benefit you can get, certainly if you're supplying a tangible product, is your ability to actually enforce retention of title on that product you supply to your customers. Obviously, I have a vested interest. I would always say to register all of your debtors, but it comes back to a case of, are you willing to take on risk for some of the smaller debtors in your ledger, and not register against them, because if you lose them, they go into administration. It's not necessarily going to heavily impact your business, but I would otherwise say yes, register against all of your debtors. Another one of the questions we've had, is it necessary to have both PPSR and credit insurance on your customers? I guess talking about PPSR and trade credit insurance, I don't necessarily think that you should have one or the other. I think they work hand in hand and have different relevancies depending on your business type. PPSR is applicable for when you have a debtor that goes into administration and you're looking to enforce your retention of title, and obviously recover some of your losses. It's not an insurance policy, as I said before, so it's not going to guarantee you're going to get back 100% of what's owing to you. Whereas a credit insurance, it's more of a comprehensive policy, and it doesn't just come into effect if and when a business goes into administration. It is an insurance policy. You're paying for insurance, so it does cover you a lot more than the PPSR potentially would. But again, it comes down to a cost versus benefit exercise. Obviously, trade insurance can be expensive. PPSR is quite cheap, but there's definitely circumstances where you should have both. Again, it comes back to what your risk appetite is, and I guess how exposed your industry is as well to losses. Look, there are quite a few more questions that have been asked of us. What I'll do is, if I haven't had a chance to answer all of those questions, I'll endeavour to get back to you as soon as I can. And yeah, certainly if you do have any questions, I'm more than happy for you to jump on and ask those as we go. Look, thanks again for attending today's webinar. As I said, I hope it was insightful for you and informative. If you do have any questions, please get in touch once again. And I look forward to hearing from you shortly and catching up with you on our next webinar. Thanks very much.